So let's take a look at the actual definition of racketeering. So in this video, we're going to take a look at a couple of different definitions as it pertains to racketeering. And this way we'll know what it is and we'll know what we're talking about as we continue to analyze how the Takashi 6ix9ine case will influence our Kelly case, right? So right here is one of the definitions for racketeering. This is Black's Law Dictionary 10th edition. Let's get into it. So basically, racketeering is a system of organized crime traditionally involving the extortion of money from business by intimidation, violence, or other illegal methods. A pattern of illegal activity such as bribery, extortion, fraud, murder, carried out as part of an enterprise such as a crime syndicate that is known or controlled by those engaged in the illegal activity. The modern sense derives from the federal RICO statute, which greatly broadens the term's original sense to include such activities as mail fraud, securities fraud, and the collection of illegal gambling debts. See 18 U.S.C. A 1951-1960. Okay, so since that definition mentioned the RICO statute, basically let's take a look at it. This is the RICO statute as it appears in Black's Law Dictionary, the 10th edition. I could have really just gone to the federal statute, which we will eventually do a little bit later, but I wanted to look at the Black's Law definition before we do that, right? So basically, it's called RICO, but it's an acronym for Racketeer Influence and Corruptions Act. And basically a 1970 federal statute designed to attack organized criminal activity and preserve the marketplace integrity by investigating, controlling, and prosecuting persons participating or conspire to participate in racketeering. 18 U.S.C. A 1961-1968. The federal RICO statute applies only to activities involving interstate or foreign commerce. That's interesting. The federal RICO statute applies to activities involving the interstate or foreign commerce. Many states have adopted similar statutes, sometimes called Little RICO Acts. The federal and most state RICO Acts provide for enforcement not only by criminal prosecution, but also by civil lawsuits in which the plaintiffs can sue for treble damages, right? So it looks like the RICO statute gives different remedies, I guess. One is to lock the person up. And then, the other remedy, it looks like you can go and sue that person if they've extorted you for money. You can sue them in court and, get damages, I guess, right? So it also gives a little bit more information. It says before criminally or civilly liability can be attached under RICO, it must be shown that two or more acts of racketeering alleged in a criminal indictment or civil complaint constitutes a pattern of racketeering activity on the part of the culpable person. The statutory definition of pattern requires at least two predicated acts occurring within 10 years of each other, with one of them occurring after October 15, 1970. More broadly put, the pattern of racketeering activity is a scheme of unlawful conduct with the nexus to both the culpable person and the enterprise, right? So that is the actual definition of the, not definition, well, I guess is the definition of the RICO statute. Let's move on to some other definitions of racketeering. Now, this is actually an earlier version of Black's Law Dictionary and is basically the 4th edition. And I tend to like the definitions out of the 4th edition a little bit better than the 10th edition. And in most cases, to me, it seems like you get a better feel for the term that you're looking up. But in this case, it may be different. It may not be. Let's read and find out, right? So basically, racketeering, an organized conspiracy to commit the crimes of extortion or coercion or attempts to commit extortion or coercion. From the standpoint of extortion, it is the obtaining of money or property from another without his consent, induced by the wrongful use of force or fear. The fear which constitutes the legally necessary element in extortion is induced by oral or written threats to do an unlawful injury to the property of the threatened person by means of explosives, fire, or otherwise, or to kill, kidnap, or injure him or a relative of his or some other member of his family. See extortion. Activities of organized criminals who extort money from legitimate businesses by violence or other forms of threat or intimidation or conduct of illegal enterprises such as gambling, narcotics traffic, or prostitution. Racketeering is demanding, soliciting, or receiving anything of value from an owner, proprietor, or other persons having a financial interest in a business by means of either threat, express or implied, or a promise, express or implied, that the person so demanding, solicit, or receiving such thing of value will A. cause the competition of the person from whom the payment is demanding, soliciting, or receiving to be diminished or eliminated, or B. cause the price of goods and services purchased or sold in the business to be increased, decreased, maintained at the stated level, or C. protect the property used in the business of a person or a family of the owner, proprietor, or other interested persons from injury by violence or otherwise unlawful means. Now, I have yet another definition of racketeering. This definition is going to be different because it's coming directly from the government, right? So this definition is in the actual statute. So we're looking at 18 USC 1961, and it's called definitions. And basically, we have racketeering here, or racketeering activity, I'm sorry, right? But before we actually read that, we are going to look at the definition of enterprise. Okay, so basically, an enterprise includes any individual, partnership, corporation, association, or other legal entity, and any union or group of individuals associated, in fact, although not a legal entity, right? So that's the definition of an enterprise. And basically, what they're doing is that they're taking all of R. Kelly's team or people or associates, and they're putting them in one trick bag. And in the case of Takashi, they're taking the Trey Nine Bloods. I don't know if I remember the name right, but they're taking the Bloods, they're putting them all in one trick bag, and they're calling it an enterprise, and that they're using this definition of an enterprise to basically prosecute them, right? So you know what? When it comes down to the definition of racketeering activity, I have decided to actually not read this because basically it's for the most part going to include all the information in the definitions that we've already read. But what this does is that it actually gets very specific, and it gives you details on the types of activities that fall under racketeering. So very briefly, racketeering activity means any act or threat involving murder, kidnapping, gambling, arson, robbery, bribery, extortion, dealing in obscene matter, or dealing in a controlled substance or illicit chemical, right, as defined in Section 102 of the Controlled Substance Act. So basically, this definition is going to go into detail about the different types of activities that fall under racketeering, or should be included in the definition of racketeering activity. But the one thing I wanted to point out why this definition is so special, it's different, is that this definition includes basically relating to the sexual exploitation of children. So basically, this definition has sexual exploitation, whereas the other racketeering definitions didn't. The other definitions are more general. This one is more granular, right? So they basically sat down, they figured out everything that they can include in racketeering activity, and they threw it in there.